Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday, everybody. Welcome to another episode here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I am your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe, welcoming you all to another author interview today. Now, my guest today is the author of the Seven Realms universe, which includes a pair of interwoven fantasy series that balance heartfelt romance, relationships, and finding a sense of belonging in the unlikeliest of places, with taking risks to protect who and what matters most and overcoming challenges both magical and mundane. My guest discovered her passion for writing in elementary school after she entered a short story in a young authors contest. And that story placed 10th in the state, which showed her the potential that stories have to be able to reach and affect people that she has never met. As an avid reader, the thought that she could also write stories that people could escape into and fall in love with fueled her creative mind and continued to sustain her passion for writing to this day. In addition to being an author, my guest is a self proclaimed jack of all trades regarding all things creative. When she isn't writing, she enjoys painting with acrylics and watercolors, drawing, making sculptures, ball joint dolls, and jewelry out of polymer clay, as well as making miniatures out of whatever she can get her hands on. She also enjoys spending time with her husband and their three cats, drinking tea, eating chocolate, doing yoga, listening to 80s music, and appreciating the little things that bring joy to her life. And I also read my guest story on the podcast a few days ago. And to tell us more about her story, let's give a huge round of applause to a first timer here on the show, young adult fantasy author Emily Lankow. Emily, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Gabriel, so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here, and I can't wait to talk to you more about my story.
Awesome, Emily. Awesome. So, before we dive into your story, is there anything else you would like to tell us about your background? Anything more about your writing? Anything more about the story that placed 10th in the state, which is a huge accomplishment?
Yeah, so that was a really fun and unexpected little story for me. I was in probably third or fourth grade when I wrote that, and it was the prompt was the day in a life of a piece of winter clothing, and so I wrote this
Ooh.
little short story about an anthropomorphized pink scarf and all of the adventures that she got to have running around with the person who wore her. And fun little story. I didn't really think, I had a lot of fun when I was writing it, but I didn't think too much of it. So for it to go on in this competition and place 10th in the state as as a third grader who'd really never written anything before was such like an inspirational moment for me. It was such a spark to go, oh my gosh, wow, somebody I have never met before read this story and liked it. Because, growing up, I've been reading, gosh, forever. And I've always had that feeling myself when I read books. I like to get lost in them, and I really enjoy that ability to relate to somebody that I have never interacted with in real life. And being on the other end of that as an author was huge. It was like the missing piece of the puzzle just clicked for me, and I've been writing ever since. I haven't been able to stop.
Nice. And then that also led to, of course, your book, The Guardian, which listeners, if you've listened to that episode, that was probably a breath of fresh air for me. It was probably one of the most refreshing fantasy stories that I've read in a very long time. And if you followed me up to this point, listeners, I tend to read a lot of like heavy, dark, very, very gritty fantasy, which I do enjoy. But it's also nice to take a step back and like enjoy the other aspects of fantasy, which I found very refreshing in Emily's book. So, Emily, what can you tell us about Guardian and the series The Guardian belongs to?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for your kind words. That means a lot to me that you say that. And that really embodies kind of what I try to do with all of my stories. where I start off in a world that's a little lighter, a little bit more familiar to readers who aren't quite as big into the high, heavy fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to start from a place of familiarity before I bring them into a new world of magic and immerse them into all of these new places and concepts. That is a theme across all of my stories. I do have two different series, but the one I'm going to be talking about today primarily is my first book, Guardian, which is a young adult fantasy novel with a wholesome romance subplot. It starts about a girl who thinks she doesn't believe in angels, right up until one quite literally falls into her life.
Yes.
The, the main character, Cassandra, I call her Cass, soon realizes that she's been tasked with being the guardian and protector of a fallen angel named Jasper, who's a fugitive of the war unfolding in the angel realm, during which Cass finds herself forced to choose between saving the angel's realm and protecting her own, a choice that's made even more difficult when she uncovers a secret that binds her to both.
Mm. And I'm not going to lie, listeners, if that doesn't like grab your attention, like I don't know what, because it was a great read. Like just that synopsis, when I read it, it was like, yes. And it will be the third angel story I featured on the channel. When I actually look back at my books that I've read, I was like, wow, this is literally the third angel book. But that's the most beautiful thing, is that yes, there are angels in it, but it's an entirely different story, which I greatly appreciate. And what I found really fascinating in the first few pages in The Guardian was that it reminded me a lot of like the stories that I remember at like a middle school, like going into high school, like those young adult fantasy stories that were on the radar, that were very, very popular. And it almost reminded me of those same stories that were adapted into movies for like the young adult movies. I got that inspiration and I like that connection. And so, Emily, when you were creating Guardian and formulating this universe, what is sort of the need or desire you want to satisfy for your reader for young adult? And actually, can you tell the listeners what young adult fiction entails?
Yes. So um, let's. I really like what you said about this reminding you of some earlier mid 2010s kinds of stories, because one of my biggest inspirations when I write is that feeling of nostalgia, that feeling of familiarity and belonging, even with
Mm-hmm.
something completely new. So, one of the things that I really always strive to achieve with my stories is not only to entertain my readers, engage their curiosity and imagination, but also to give them that sense of being able to see themselves in that situation or in those characters and have something that they can really relate to and feel a solidarity with. Um, so, with this being a young adult fantasy book, it's fun that you should say that, because when I was first getting ready to publish Guardian, I did a lot of exploration
Right.
on genres and things like that, and for a long time, um, it took me quite a bit to realize that I do write young adult fantasy, because there's kind of this. A lot of people have a mental barrier thinking young adult means for kids, for
Mm-hmm.
and it actually isn't. It really does mean young adult, and so it's one of the broadest genres that I think exists, and one of my favorite genres to read, honestly, because not only can it have the duality of covering heavier topics sometimes than some of the even younger stuff, juvenile fiction and such, but
Mm-hmm.
it also still tends to run a happy medium midline under things like the new adult fiction or fantasy being a little lighter, not having quite as gritty of concepts, or if it does, they are not necessarily featured on the page quite as in detail. So
Right.
there might be dark things in characters' pasts, but I think it's a really nice balance between being able to get into those larger or heavier or more complex concepts, but doing it in a way that is I don't want to say more relatable because that's not the word I'm looking for, but for me, it feels like it's done in a way that um, makes me relate to it more. Like
Hmm.
I feel more engaged with that middle ground, and then also it kind of, is a nice place to give you a little bit of cushion against, you don't get into quite as much of the violent, gruesome things or as much of the sexual things.
Right.
It's kind of, it really is more balanced, in my opinion, sometimes.
I definitely agree. And I think what you said almost reminds me of definitely like the shows to make the connection of Guardian, almost like the shows of the early 2000s and 2010s. Me being a comics fan to make the connection of Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, those
Mhm.
were kid shows. But even in those kid shows, they did touch on grown up, mature themes, but they tackled it in a way where they could not traumatize their viewers but
Mhm.
give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to treat them as adults, but still
Mhm.
recognize them as kids. And that's what I got from Guardian, that you don't play down to the reader. You
Mhm.
acknowledge that here are the themes that are going to come about. They're not going to be explicit, they're not going to be graphic, but they are
Mhm.
going to make you a little uncomfortable, but it's not going to be a turn off in the story, which I found to be very, very cool and really shows a maturity of craftsmanship and interweaving those complex themes into the first few pages. And it feels more organic. And then, kind of leading into that, when you finish the first draft of Guardian before you even published it, what was
Mhm.
your initial promise you made to your prospective audience?
So, the promise I made with this story and all of my stories is to deliver a vibrant world my readers can lose themselves in, with a variety of characters that they can relate into in one way or the other, which ties back to that, the breadth of themes and the realism and the more mundane parts, if you will, of some of the emotional topics, relationships. Like one of the characters struggles with alcoholism and some
Hmm.
risky behavior in the midst of going through some serious grief. So, my promise is always to not only give readers a story that is going to entertain them in some parts and make them happy, make them chuckle, but also have that opposite side of these more real things that make them think or can make them kind of I didn't realize it when I was actually writing my story until after I was done with the first draft, but I've realized that when I write my stories, I tend to confront certain things that have been happening in my own life in certain
Hmm.
ways. Um, Specifically for Guardian, it was that scene where she was on the river in the Nether Haven, facing her shadow self or her alter self, who was saying all of these terrible things to her about herself, trying to tear her down.
Right.
And I think that scenes like that are things that I didn't realize I was struggling with at the time until it was down on the page, and I was like, well, I did not plan on laying my soul that bare, but I did. I worked through it. It was very therapeutic for me, and I think that in doing that kind of thing and opening myself up to those more uncomfortable but more real moments that like so many of us struggle with, I think is
Hmm.
something that a lot of readers will really resonate with.
Definitely. And I could definitely see that in definitely the first, like the whole overall story and just what it ultimately means. This really positive, good feeling, this hero's journey, which I think is like the very classic story that all stories follow, which is the hero's journey. It's probably
Hmm.
the most easy one to use, but it's the most tangible. And I can definitely feel that there's like two hero journeys in this story. Now, I don't want to spoil it for my listeners, so you will just have to go and check out the book yourself. But it is an incredible story, and I absolutely love it. And then kind of leading into the next few questions, Emily, when you finally published Guardian, what was the initial feedback like from your audience? Was it positive? Was it a little negative? Or was it mixed?
So I'm really thankful to have received a lot of really extremely positive feedback on Guardian so far. Of course, there were a couple of critiques in there. There always are.
Hmm.
You're not going to please everybody, and I also really appreciate the opportunity to improve as well. But I think as a whole, people have really been transported into Guardian as I intended, and I think it really shows in the feedback that I've received from it so far. A lot of people um, have really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate that. And there has been a lot of eagerness for the second book, which is in the works at some point. But I'm working on another series that I'm going to finish first because it does some important world building stuff in this universe that will come back around in the next Guardian book. But so yeah, overall as a whole, very positive, and I'm really grateful for that.
That's amazing. That's really, really good. And kind of like leading into that, would you say that seeing those reviews has validated your promise that you said to your readers? Has that been shown in the reviews that you've gotten?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the biggest feedback that I've been getting from reviews is people talking about how much they love the characters, and how everybody's got a favorite. There's always someone that they relate to, and how much they've been transported into the world. Just completely consumed and taken somewhere else. And that is like my number one thing that I got out of reading myself growing up was being able to escape reality for a little while, get out of my own head, and completely travel somewhere new. And so I think I'm delivering that with this story as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Absolutely love to hear that. Now, this is kind of like a very heavy question, but I always think it is important. So, Emily, I imagine when you began writing Guardian and formulating this out, you probably spent hours working on it, series of revisions, series of edits, sending it to editors and stuff like that. And I've always said this on the show with all of my guests that being an author is a very lonely business. You're spending hours and hours creating something that may or may not resonate with the audience. And you always have that sense of imposter syndrome. A lot of my guests have brought up this sense of imposter syndrome, which is uh, kind of prevalent within the indie author community, where it's like, I'm actually going to create a book and try to fit in with these titans of literature and try to say, like, I can be here. It kind of messes with the psyche of any young author. And it's kind of, in some cases, I've had some guests say it turned them away from writing for many years before they got back. So for you, Emily, in those kind of bleak moments, what has still motivated you to write? Or rather, let me rephrase the word, what has disciplined you to continue writing?
That's a very good word because, that's exactly what it is, discipline. It's really easy to get disheartened. And the most important thing is to recognize that even the greats have imposter syndrome. It happens to everyone. I think it's something that happens not only to authors, but to creatives in general, and maybe even people in general. I think that that's just a natural part of our survival instinct to doubt ourselves and to doubt whether we're doing the right thing because we want to succeed. And so I think, the most important part of getting through that is having that discipline to be, to acknowledge, okay, I'm having an off day. I'm really struggling, but pick yourself back up and keep going. Whether that, a lot of people have a lot of different methods. Some people go, have look at positive reviews, or if you have a specific thought that's triggering it, trying to address that specific thought, talk it through with somebody. I've got a really lovely little folder. I don't remember where I saw this online somewhere, probably, but I have this very lovely little folder on my desktop of my laptop called Take That Imposter Syndrome. And it's screenshots of the most positive reviews of things that I've made, or comments, or just discussions I've had with people validating and kind of highlighting the good moments so that even in the bleakest moments, I can remind myself that that is not a permanent state. I'm not always going to feel like that. And I just have to pick myself up, keep going, and be motivated. And, and the other thing is with the motivation, not waiting to feel motivated, just getting back into it and forcing yourself to do it is really helpful to try and get yourself out of that mindset, because sometimes when you're in your low moments, you can feel like you're just going through the motions, but then that muscle memory will kick over. And then
Right.
you'll, if for, I can't speak to every author's experience, but for me, my writing and my stories are very much about simultaneously being very in my head and getting out of my head, with the fantasy elements, getting out and talking to my characters and getting into that other world and getting into their problems instead of my own, because it's always seems like somebody else's problems are easier to face than your own. And that has always really helped, just trying to keep pushing forward and to acknowledge and to let yourself have those moments, but to not let them stop you or bog you down for too long.
I absolutely agree. And that is true. If you discipline yourself to write, if you actually have like a calendar that says, I'm going to write 30 minutes a day, and that could be it. That could be like your thing the whole day, just 30 minutes a day or 1,000 words a day. If
Mhm.
that is what it helps you keep writing, that
Mhm.
schedule, then that works. I even had authors who've even said that they read authors in their genre that really helps them do more research into their style of writing, how they
Mhm.
approach certain characters and story elements, which then I'm going to turn over to you, Emily. So, how would you say the young adult authors that you have read have shaped your writing style and prose?
That is, that's a really great question. I have so many authors that I enjoy reading, and I think a lot of the time those influences happen more subconsciously, because when I read a story that I just feel enveloped and I don't necessarily pin down exactly what it is that I like about it, but something just, it's got that extra magic, that just kind
Right.
of sticks, kind of resonates. And I think that most of the time when I have those influences, they rub off on me, with my voice, my storytelling style, in a subconscious way that I don't necessarily always know, but I'll go back and I'll read a passage and I'll be like, oh yeah, that totally reminds me of this story that I read, or this totally sounds like, this author that I really like, or, just some of those vibes, I guess, would be the best way that I say that I take influence from other authors. Is I just really like, that the kind of feeling that they're able to achieve in whatever story that they're telling.
Nice. And as a little tangent, are there any specific authors you would like to name or specific books that have really helped shape your style of writing and your authorial voice?
Yes. So I think this is probably pretty closely aligned to like who are my favorite authors or who are the authors that I enjoy reading the most, because I tend to notice that the authors and stories I enjoy reading the most are probably because they're similar to the way that I write, and I don't know, it's kind of a chicken or the egg situation.
Right.
Um, do I like this because it reminds me of my stuff, or vice versa? But I think the biggest ones for me the last couple of years have been Elizabeth Lim. She is the author of the Six Crimson Cranes. She's done a couple of duologies. She tends to have young adult fantasy, Asian inspired folklore type stories, and they're
Ooh, all
really
right.
vibrant worlds. Like you can practically smell the food when you're walking down the street in your head. Like they're just
Oh,
beautiful
nice.
stories. Um, and then I also am really fond of TJ Klune. He does this really beautiful balance of like the heavy ideas with the more comedic voice, sometimes lighter moments, happier moments. And he always seems to have this really unique and well crafted mix of characters that are all like so individual and independent of one another, and just like so vibrant that I can see them right in front of me. My favorite of TJ Klune's books is Under the Whispering Door, which starts about a character who is meant to be unlikable. He's just not a very nice person. He dies. The story is about his journey through going through the afterlife and acceptance to be able to move on. So it's this very heavy topic. But
Wow.
along the journey, he learns to not only be a better person, and by the end of the book, you totally love him and you don't want to see anything bad happen to him, which is such a huge important thing to be able to do in your writing, to take that character that intentionally at the beginning nobody likes, you're supposed to not like him, and by the end you're rooting for him because the arc is just so beautifully written. I think I cried at the end of that book. It was so beautiful.
Nice. And that's always a good thing you can tell from a good book. If it makes you, I'm glad you brought up the point with like, if you can smell the food, that for me
Mhm.
reminds me of the Redwall series by Brian Jacques. And if anyone has read those series, you know, growing up, that is the kid version Game of Thrones because no one survives in those books. It's all animal based, all medieval. Not really on like the fantasy side, more of like folklore-ish, but the
Okay.
stories were so good and they really, really captivated your mind. And of course, there was always the songs and the stories that at the end of the day, that's what a good book is supposed to do. It's supposed to be an escapism from reality into a new world and just to jump along the pages. And that I feel is the truest goal for any author. If a reader can escape into your book for a short while.
Absolutely.
Nice. Now we're going to go into the more business side of the interview, which is now specifically talking about being an author. So, for you, Emily, when you decide to publish The Guardian, did you initially want to be traditionally published, or did you go the indie route? And if so, what have you learned about the indie route in terms of the business model, how to do research for arcs, managing cover artists, editors,
Mhm.
and stuff like that?
Okay. Well, this is a huge question, and I could talk about this one question all day, and I have in some circumstances. So I'll try and keep this condensed. So I am an indie author. I actually got my roots as a hybrid author. As a freshman in high school, I published my
Oh,
very, very
okay.
first book with a I can't think of the word right now, but it's one of those you pay and they publish and they help you as a hybrid.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. And while I really appreciate having had that experience and I learned a lot from doing it, it is not a mistake I would repeat. Not only was it, very costly for what I got out of it. There's the number one rule in self-publishing is if they're asking for money to publish your book, don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are so many things from the self-publishing side of it that you are in charge of and that you end up paying for on your own, like your editor, your cover artist,
Yes.
formatters, things like that. So, if you're going to self-publish. The vanity presses, that's the word I was thinking of. The
Yes.
vanity presses are not worth it. And honestly, they were more interested in selling my books to me than they were selling them to readers. Um, but again, as you said, I learned a lot from that experience. I learned a lot about the publishing industry as a whole. After that experience, I went on to, try to pursue being traditionally published for quite some time. Did the whole query letter soliciting thing, and just, that was a really rough point in my life because that was really disheartening.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually am going to weave one of your other questions into this
All
answer
right.
because during that time of my life when I was going through all of those submissions, I had actually read Stephen King's autobiography. And while I
Oh,
don't
okay.
have a lot of Stephen King's actual stories, he had quite a bit of wisdom in his autobiography. Specifically, there's something that he said that always stuck with me about his early writing career, about when he was going through, submissions and getting rejected. He had like this nail sticking out of the dorm room wall of his room, and every time he'd get a rejection letter, he'd put it on that nail, and when that nail got full, he'd take them off and put them in a shoebox. And by the time he got even his first publication in like a newspaper or something, he had thousands of rejections. And it's a lot. And I mean, traditional publishing is a good fit for some people, but it takes a lot of work to get there. It takes a lot of work on
Hmm.
both sides. And after having done it enough myself for a while, I decided that that really wasn't the route I wanted to go. I took a step back for many years and worked on honing my craft instead, and started dipping my toe into the self-publishing world, seeking out an independent editor that I was working with, and things of that nature. And then finally decided, as I was learning more about the industry, that, hey, self publishing actually might be a really good fit for me, because I am really good at being able to, pick this stuff up, learn what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, and kind of expand on those things. I also really liked the freedom of being able to choose who I work with. And
Right.
that's huge for me, because if there's someone that you don't communicate with well, or don't mesh with well, or your styles are just too different to be compatible,
Hmm.
it is really important to be able to say, hey, this is not working for me. I appreciate that we gave it a shot, but I need to be able to find someone else who's going to be a better fit for me and the way I want to run my business. And that has been huge for me, just enormous, a game changer. And I think that that's probably one of the most important things that I've learned with the self publishing, is to always follow your gut. And like don't, it's good to, be professional and be polite and stay on people's good sides, but it also doesn't mean that you have to be a people pleaser to the point of sacrificing your own comfort and efficiency and the quality of the product you're putting out. Because at
Right.
the end of the day, I mean, a book is still a product. You're still
Yeah.
having to, even self-publishing, there are certain quality standards and guidelines that I want to meet
Hmm.
in the artwork, in the way it's formatted, in the way it's printed, in the way it's edited, to deliver the best possible version of the art that I created to my readers. And so being able to have it's very difficult sometimes to have to run all those things yourself, but to have the ability to do so, it's kind of a double-edged sword. But I personally, for me, it works really well to be able to have that kind of control and that kind of decision making, and then delegate as necessary. So it takes a lot of commitment to stick with the self-publishing stuff, because there's just so much that has to be done and that goes into it. But at the end of the day, I think I'm happier now self-publishing, and I feel like I have more control over my own success than I did starting out with Vanity Press.
I 100% agree, and I'm glad that you brought that up. One of my friends who I've had on the show a long time ago, her name is Raven White. Shout out to her and Corvid Press, Curated Corvid Press. She actually brought up exactly the same things that you did. When people want to go the traditionally published route, which, as you mentioned, it's good for them, but there's also that risk, because traditionally published houses or traditional publishing routes, they have to figure out, is this book going to make us money? Because at the end of the day, they are presenting a product to an audience. And if that book doesn't sell, then that's it for you. You're pretty much done. And then another thing that you also brought up too is not trying to be a people pleaser, or not in a sense you want to get an audience, but you don't want to create something for the latest trend, because that's not going to
Exactly.
be your best work. And
It's it's kind of about a compromise, and I love that you say that, because it's, when you're self-publishing and you're managing everything yourself, there is, this slippery slope of, you know, knowing what to keep and what to change, but it's also really empowering because while it can sometimes be difficult to make those decisions that are more business decisions rather than personal decisions, as far as like, I want to keep this because I like it,
Mm-hmm.
um, it kind of, it just gives you a greater flexibility to be able to find your audience and find the right audience and kind of tailor your work toward that audience in a combination of ways where you are making those decisions that serve a business purpose, but also are not like head on diving into trends and just
Right.
doing that because it works.
Definitely. And another business question for you, Emily. How important do you think it is for an author to really understand who their audience and readership is? Because I asked this question in the sense that when authors begin writing, or people who want to go into being an author full time, they think, oh, I'm just going to write and I'm going to attract everyone. Well, that's
Mhm.
good depending on the book you want to write. If you want to write a super intense spy thriller based upon Jack Reacher, Jack Ryan, you may only get a small niche of the writing population. If you want to go super high complex fantasy like Tolkien or C.S. Lewis, you may get that audience. So,
Mhm.
in your opinion, Emily, how important is it for an author to really know who their audience is and to do the research into that market?
I think it is incredibly important. This is something that I didn't necessarily have quite as much of a grasp on when I first started writing, as I would have liked to, and it's something I've learned the more that I write. But it's really important to know who your audience is and who you're writing to, and that's not to say you can't still be figuring that out as you go along and learning more about who
Mm-hmm.
they are and what they like. But having a basis on, who you're writing for to start out with is super, super important. One of the things that I have learned about my audience, and I've kind of had a revelation lately, because going back into the imposter syndrome and the reviews and things like that, one of the things that I've been working on lately is my relationship with reviews. There's a
Right.
lot of controversy about whether or not reviews are for other readers or authors.
Right.
And it's super important for other readers to be able to see reviews and determine whether or not a story would be a good fit for them. But as an author, the thing that I have kind of started to learn recently is that I'm not going to please everybody. Not everybody's going to like my story. There is an element to finding my audience that's trial and error. But by looking at those reviews and looking at the really low ones and looking at the really high ones, it starts to help me identify who my ideal audience is. Because a 5-star book for me might be a 1-star book for somebody else. That doesn't
Right.
mean it's a really good book or a really bad book. It just means
Mm-hmm.
it was a better fit for my taste than it was for theirs. And
Correct.
so that's how I'm starting to look at my own reviews, the ones that are the 5 stars. That's my audience. How do I start to, and the ones that are my 1-star reviews, they're probably not in my target audience. And so it's like looking at that data and starting to analyze trends and starting to look at the things they say, and realizing who are these people, how do I connect with them more, how do I find more of them. And there's an element of networking that goes into that, because when I write, there are a couple of different levels that I write at to, kind of decide that audience. Like when I'm writing my rough draft, I'm primarily just writing for myself or
Right.
a couple of close people who have very similar interests to me. And then as I move forward with editing and things like that, I will then I'll open that scope and look at a bigger target audience of people who like this genre, or people who like these themes, or people who like, and kind of then go from what I started with and take out the things that wouldn't work for them, or put in things that would, or just kind of, tweak it a little bit. but still starting from a place that's really true to myself, and knowing again that duality, that balance, and how to find it, and how to simultaneously write something that is very organic and genuine and true to yourself, but to still give your ideal readers what they want for the most part.
100%. And that kind of leads into a different question that I'm going to ask you, Emily. Now, I was going to ask you the question of, do you write for yourself or for a reader in mind? But you've already answered that question since that you write
Mhm.
for you. So instead, I'm going to ask you this important question, which I think it's a tough question for authors to really ask, but I think it's a necessary one, which is, well, let me give you this thing that I've learned from another author I've interviewed on the show. So she told me probably one of the biggest lies that an author will believe in is that their book is instantly going to be an overnight success, or that your debut novel is what's going to make your name. That's not necessarily going to be the case, and it's a hard pill to swallow. That, as we've talked about in this interview, writing's a lonely process. You could spend hours, if not years, writing just one book. And that might not be the one that makes your name. It may be your 10th book that truly gets your name out there. But then you can take it as a positive and you can tell your fan base saying, hey, if you like this, you can see my other stories, because then they can see your growth as an author in terms of your writing, how you approach your characters, and overall story structure. So I guess the question that I'm going to ask you, Emily, is how important do you think an author really has to take consideration that their debut book is not going to be the book that's going to make them famous, or let me phrase it, the true beginning of their legacy?
Yep. I absolutely, that so much of what you just said resonates with me, because so many authors think that it's a matter of luck, or it's a matter of, overnight, and that's actually something that I still realistically and logically know, but still have to remind myself on a regular basis that things do not happen overnight.
Right.
Um, and I think that is one of the most, if not the most important thing that you really need to be aware of when you're deciding if you want to start publishing, because it is a hard pill to swallow.
Hmm.
You want to be successful, and you want to be seen, and you want people to be able to read and enjoy your stories, but it's really difficult reaching them. There are so many books out there. There is constantly more books, especially with self-publishing being so accessible now. It is so important to stand out, and a lot of the time the people who stand out are not the ones who do something different once. They're the ones that keep going. um,
Right.
Keep building your audience a little bit at a time, keep doing more and more interviews, keep, doing more events, keep engaging with your readers, keep writing more books. One of the most valuable pieces of advice that was given to me when I wanted to start publishing again, before Guardian, was don't just have the one, have a couple of books mostly ready to go by the time you're starting to publish, so that way you can publish a couple regularly at regular intervals to give people other things to read. Because if they read your stuff and they like it and they don't have anywhere else to go, they're probably going to forget about you for a while.
Right.
And so, being able to lay a strong foundation, but to know that the amount of people that are going to get seen based on just that foundation is going to be so small. You have to put in work, and you have to build on those building blocks every single day and never stop. And there will be some days you don't feel like you're making any progress, but you are. It's there, and it happens in baby steps. The whole Rome wasn't built in a day.
Hmm.
Neither is a writing career. Most people are not. There are a lot of people that never get to the point where they're making enough money off their books for that to be their day job. But those who are the ones that have 10 and 20 and 30 books,
Right.
because, they've built that empire, so to speak.
Definitely. And it's, again, It is a definitely a hard pill to swallow, but it is a necessary thing to grow as an author. And sometimes in those moments where we've had those sense of like going back again to imposter syndrome and feelings of self-doubt, it's always good to have a supportive group that really helps you pick yourself back up to your feet. So kind of like a more lighthearted question for you, Emily. Who have been your biggest supporters in your authorial journey?
So I have been really fortunate to have a lot of people in my corner. Um, I have a couple of best friends, both long distance. Why do you have to live so far away? Who have always been very supportive, even before I started publishing again. You know, they were my very early readers. They were my early feedback. You know, they've contributed a lot in those stories, and I'm always super grateful for them. You know, those are that's my core group of when I'm writing my rough draft is those people. Um, so I am so lucky that I've had them for such a long time. And then more recently, as I've actually started publishing and growing my circle, I've met quite a few authors and readers who have all been really supportive. Lately, my biggest supporters have been Brie Arbelez. I butchered that. I practiced so many times. um, I think it's Brie Arbelez. She helps manage my street teams and ARC readers, and she's also working on a fantasy book of her own that she's hoping to publish in the near future. I don't know that she set a date for it, but she's been so supportive. Ambrose Harker, she is also working on some projects that are yet to be published, but she is always there when I have a question or something to bounce off of her. You know, anytime I'm just like, hey, does this work? You know, she's always got really great ideas to be able to run by and stuff. And then Lygia DeWitt, she is the author of Touch of Fate. She actually just had her second book come out last month in that trilogy. And she is someone that I have met more recently, but she has been incredibly helpful, and she always is there anytime I have questions. She's talked pretty extensively with me about her own experience publishing and doing events and conferences and things like that. And I feel so lucky to be a part of this community because just, I mean, indie authors in general are such supportive people. And I think that that is
Yes.
so important because it's really the kind of thing that you, as lonely as the actual writing itself is, the marketing is the total opposite of that. You cannot be successful alone, and you are the most successful by helping others. And so having that circle of support where, you know, it like comes around, goes around, and you're all helping each other with questions or learning from each other is
Right.
such a beautiful thing. And I'm so happy to be part of a community that helps everyone grow.
Absolutely. I'm actually glad you brought that up because it is true. The indie author community is a very cohesive, very connective community. We all support one another. And just like you, I've been fortunate to find my circle of people that really enjoy my work. I found great people that have helped me um, with my covers, with some other stuff for my books. You can't really see Emily, but right next to me is a wall of hand drawn maps, which I then have in my books, which a friend in England has made. She's hand drawn them. She's stained them in tea, has like burnt edges, and those
Oh,
are
they're like legit.
oh yeah, and she has her own seal that she then stamps it with like a wax seal on it to protect it. And she's been awesome. I have another friend of mine, a fellow author from South Africa, Kim Appelgren, who's been my biggest cheerleader, and she's always been a huge support, and a lot of other great people. And at the end of the day, we all want to help one another. And this kind of leads into the second to last question, Emily. Have you ever gotten a sense of validation from fellow authors who have read your book? Or, as like a second part to this, do you not seek a validation in the sense that you do not solely write to get validated? It's nice to get validated, once in a while, but that shouldn't be the sole motivation to write, because it's one thing to work on a project and to join anything. It's like any job, either business, marketing, anything. It's one thing to do all the research, do all the schooling, and to join a community. It's another thing entirely to have your peers recognize your success and comment.
Mhm. Yeah, I think validation is a really important part of the process because there is so much that you do alone. So when you get that validation, it's really kind of another form of support to know that you're doing the right thing and you're going in the right
Hmm.
direction. I mean, I think everybody appreciates it, and I think that it's a very helpful and motivating thing sometimes, but it absolutely should not be the sole reason or even one of the sole reasons that you write.
Right.
Your, in my opinion, in writing and any kind of creating, your validation should really come from your readers primarily. You're there to serve them, to provide them with something entertaining or that makes them feel good. And so for me, a lot of the time, my validation comes from being able to achieve that for them. Being able to give them those experiences and know that I'm delivering what I set out to deliver. Um, that being said, I think it is. Sorry, my brain.
No
um,
rush.
no, I think that was about it. I think validation is important for a lot of reasons, and it's kind of impossible to not seek in at least some ways. I mean, part of being a creator and putting things out there in any capacity is that feedback loop. Part of earning that validation and that feedback is not only a motivator to keep going, and it sometimes can be difficult. I would imagine it would be difficult to not have any of that at all and to want to keep going. But it also helps you learn and improve your craft as well. So I think that it's not the reason you should be writing, but it is something that is still very important to to have and to take into account.
100%. And that kind of leads into the last question of this amazing interview, Emily. So, with all the years of writing that you've learned from your own experiences, all the hurdles you've gone through, the trials and tribulations, what is your word of wisdom to future authors out there who want to transition from writing hobbyists to writing professionals?
Yes. I have a couple of pieces of advice. The first one is get out of your own way. I have to remind myself on probably a daily basis to get out of my own way. Stop waiting for the perfect time, the perfect circumstances, etc. That's not to say it's not important to put in the effort to improve your work and skills along the way, but if you wait until something's actually perfect to do it, it'll never get done. Um, you know, I still regularly notice little things that in books that I've already released that, oh, if I was releasing this now, I would tweak it and do it this way. And that's never going to stop. Part of being a creator is that continuing to grow. And if you wait or constantly are going back to fix things, you're never going to continue and grow. So at some point, you just have to give it your all and do it and just get out of your own way. It's really scary to chase your dreams, but it's even scarier to start to wonder if you'll ever actually do it at all. The other piece of advice that feeds into that is don't stop. Things are scary, things are hard. You get in your own head, you wonder, can I really do this? There are so many reasons not to, but at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that you do. If you want it, you will. And nothing else matters. If you want to do it, you will. There will always be people who don't like what you do. There will always be things you could have done better that you would wish you would have done differently. There will always be learning opportunities. But if you wait to do the things that you really want to do, or if you let yourself or other things get in your way. If you let things, make you quit, I yeah, just don't stop. I mean, you can take a break, you can be scared, you can have a moment, but pick yourself back up and get back on it and do the thing.
Perfectly stated and perfectly said. And with that, listeners, this concludes this wonderful interview with our guest, Emily, today. But before we officially end it, I want to give a huge thank you to her for joining us today and allowing her the floor to promote any future projects and to say where us can follow her on any of her socials.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed doing this interview. You had a lot of really great questions. You really challenged me in some of them and made me think, and I really appreciate that. The best way to engage with me is on my website, emilylankow.com. That's EMILYLANKOW.com. If you're interested in news, bonus content, stories, or even chatting directly with me, I would really recommend signing up for my newsletter. I do a monthly newsletter and I let you know about events that I'm doing, projects that I'm working on, and I periodically give out free bonus content like deleted scenes, conversations with my characters, character art, all kinds of fun stuff. So, my newsletter, highly recommended. I'm also hoping to have some free short stories available soon that way as well, just for newsletter subscribers. I also post pretty regularly on my Facebook and Instagram. Um, and then, in addition to Guardian, which is the first book in the Rise of the Fallen series, I'm also working on a second series called The Fall of the Enclave. The first book in that series is called Rift Rider, and book 2 of that series is actually coming out at the end of this month. I'm very excited. And these series are both part of the Seven Realms universe, which is a set of projects that I work on that have separate characters, a separate plot, but that happen in the same universe. So there are some parts later in both of the series that kind of have some crossover. The worlds build on each other, the magic systems build on each other. And so while you don't have to read both in order to get the most out of them, it does actually they do play on each other, and there's tons of fun Easter eggs. So you get a whole extra level of understanding if you do read both. So, but yep, that new book is coming out on April 29th. So if you haven't checked out that series, please do. That is young adult urban fantasy with LGBTQ characters. And I'm so excited to share it with you guys.
And I will link all those down below in the description. And if you also want to follow it on also on my episode with the book, if I'm not mistaken, it also should be there. So you can either check it out on this episode or you can go back to my book impressions video. It has all the links there. And with that, listeners, this concludes officially the interview. I want to give a huge thank you to our guest, Emily Lankow, for joining us. And I wish her continued success in her journey. And I cannot wait to see what else she has in store for the writing world.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. And as always, listeners, it's been the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe signing out. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what has been your favorite part of the interview or favorite episode of this week. And be on the lookout for future episodes coming out later next week and the weeks after. Until then, see you next time.